and we just finished up our segment about how democracy should be conceptualized, and we had a really good conversation, even bringing in personal experiences as well, on how democracy in America should be constructed. And piggyback off of that, we'll be going into our next segment, what is an American? And we'd like to start with the first question of, what is the current political rhetoric on the definition of being American? And I can start off this segment for us. So I think personally for me, what I've seen, especially in the current political debate between followers of MAGMA, of Trump, and also people who are more Democratic, and just this back and forth between Democrats and also Republicans of this American has like an image of it being like this white person of who is a citizen, like legally with all documents, whether they be born here in America or they went through the naturalization process. Also, of course, kind of piggyback off of my experience in the last segment, someone who speaks English, someone who's incorporated themselves into like the American culture. Not quite sure what the American culture would be, if that'd be like eating French fries and fast food with American culture, but very much someone who's very patriotic and has like an American flag standing outside of their house, and someone who is very prideful and kind of being American and like almost kind of like negating almost all of like the bad like history and also bad dark past that we have in America, and just like saying that, you know, America is number one as expressed previously. And that this is a country that is first, no matter what wrongdoings is done in the past. And at the end of the day, we're Americans and we're great. And that is what an American citizen should be. That it should have this idea of like being very patriotic and also speaking and accepting all the social norms, such as speaking English and being involved in this American culture is what an American should be, from what I've seen currently with this whole debate going on. And next I'd like to pass it on to Mariah.
Yeah, so I feel like freedom and individuality are fundamental aspects of the American identity. Yet defining what it means to be American is not really straightforward. While citizenship is often used as a criterion, from a humanistic Baldwinian perspective, emphasizes the value of human dignity and often rejects the notion that identity should be determined by race or political affiliation. I think that citizenship should also be included in that narrative. Being American means advocating for legal justice, defending the rights and freedoms of all individuals, regardless of their background, and overall just fostering a sense of belonging and responsibility to our communities. And it really entails recognizing the impact of our words, our actions, whether it's intentional or not, on others. And I'll like for Mahima to go next.
Yeah, so I also agree that the current political rhetoric on what it means to be an American is very polarizing on both ends. I think we've been having a lot of conversation about that in our daily lives. And for me personally, I think that it goes back to the conception of white freedom
Valeria,
and how we
cállate.
believe that the freedom that we have in our country currently specifically applies to white people and specifically white men. We haven't been discussing the differences that people have and how it relates to being an American and our current definition. But I do think that a lot of tokenism is going on in our political sphere on both sides of the parties. So we see, like when it comes to election time, things are brought up about like, I just know like recently for DACA recipients, they were saying that they can have health care, but there's no path to citizenship that comes along with it, right? So this is like, when the Democratic Party is going for re-election, now it's time for re-election, now suddenly these policies are being implemented. Same with Trump, former President Trump saying that he was going to build a wall, and how that was used as a way of rallying people up to support him that were anti-immigrant or anti-Hispanics and had just these like racist stereotypes ingrained in their society. And so I think that we constantly see like this tokenism, even in, we were actually discussing this off camera, but we were discussing how in our literal college, we see a lot of tokenism from like people in our institution that will say that congratulations, like on being a very what is a diverse campus. That's what we take pride in, but we don't see a lot of changes being done through the institution aside from when it comes to like celebrating it and a time of broadcasting it to the public. So if we have anything for like minorities that we're forced to do, we were also discussing this, how like we're a part of student organizations and it's the job of student organizations to bring up like have events like that reflect our culture, that reflects our religion, our history, whatever it may be. And then once we're done with it, we get a picture taken and then we put on the Rutgers newer Instagram page, right? So we don't have support that comes with this practice, and we see that in our own school system. So once you take that back to the legal world, we see that everywhere within like our politics, our policies, where we're tokenized and people of color are tokenized into this idea of being an American when it benefits everyone else, but not on the day to day. And now I'll pass it on to Ryan.
Thanks. Yeah, I feel like there's this narrative of being performative and only using diversity for the sake of it. And sometimes this political rhetoric of being an American, sometimes it doesn't always feel genuine, or it doesn't always feel like we're recognizing groups for the sake genuinely for their accomplishments, but just because we have to. And I feel like it's also like deemed like within our own system of readily determining who's an American. For example, a naturalized citizen, meaning a person who gained U.S. citizenship over their lifetime, still can't become the president of the United States. So how come if we want to celebrate diversity, if we want to celebrate that Americans, we come in all different shapes, forms, colors, yet they still can't, naturalized citizens still can't hold the highest position in our nation. They're still not entrusted to be in charge of this country. It's still like these things within our own system that perpetuates these ideas of American has to look like this, American has to act like that. That how are we supposed to change it on the grassroots level if it's not even going to be changed on what are the systems and institutions in place? And how can we make sure it's genuine? Like making sure that we're not just doing it just because or to tokenize some groups, but because we genuinely want to celebrate diversity and we truly, and with that celebration comes then these groups benefiting from it. And now I'll pass it on to Isela.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. For me, something that I want to showcase here in terms of the political rhetoric that has defined America has been the idea of assimilation. Minorities like ourselves have continuously, from the start, coming to this country trying to assimilate to the values, to the beliefs, to the ideologies of this country. Stepping away, distancing ourselves, I would say that from our own culture, from our beliefs, to kind of fulfill the American dream, but also to be accepted into this American society, to have that validation and approval that we belong here. And I think that's been very detrimental because you're not only leaving behind everything that you as a individual are and what you stand for genuinely, and also what your background means to you, but you're also forgetting a large part of who you are. having to assimilate to a country that continuously harms minorities. Like, why do we have to, like, my question is, like, why do we have to? Like, why do we need that um, type of process, or go through that process that is harmful to us, but yet we have to go and do it regardless? Like, it's just something that is very mind-boggling. And thinking about something, another, like, something personal, or just another small experience that I've also been through recently, has been with my own organization, right? Are You Dreamers? Are You Dreamers, which supports undocumented students on campus. And recently, with the strike, right, the union having their bargaining become a success, it's amazing that that happened. But it was something that it really spoke to Are You Dreamers, in terms of finding that kind of collective, collaborative support from an institution, from the union. If we ever decide as undocumented students on campus to go on strike to get those to get our needs addressed, trying to go out of our way to connect with these people, with these academics, so that they can see our value, so that they can see what we're worth as students and as individuals. Having to kind of like finding a way to for them to really just be in solidarity with us, instead of having to I would say, like, instead of having to, like, build a relationship based on something that is not benefiting both parties. It has to be mutual interest, or something gained in return. And that's just something that I think that shouldn't be like that. I think that if the university prides itself in diversity, inclusion, and equity, it should do that genuinely, because it actually cares about its students, and not because they're looking for some kind of gain from it. And I really think that, just kind of bringing it back to that political rhetoric, that is something that happens in the university, but it can happen to other people. It happens to other minorities trying to find a way in the work field, and trying to show their worth in a position that they're not usually seen. It's really something that continuously has impacted our people, and, like, we still, regardless, want to pertain to this country, want to belong to this country. Like, so how do you reconcile with that? Something like food for thought, I would say. But I'll pass it on to Ryan. I'm sorry, Mahima.
So I believe I've already answered this question, so I'll pass it on to Ryan. Did you go yet? Okay, so I think that everybody went, and if no one else has any input to go into our previous question, we can go on to the next one, which is, how do you define being an American? And I can also start off this question. And I personally, the first thought that kind of came into my head was just like this kind of almost broad definition of this law-abiding person that lives within the United States. And of course, I think in order to be able to say that you have a home within a certain country, you have to kind of respect the legalities that are in that country, and also respect the laws that are in there, of course, and everything. And as well as also having to accept as well the country for what it stands for. So, of course, within America, it stands for, of course, democracy, equality, liberation, and also the embrace of other cultures. At least it should be what that stands for. And of course, not everyone's definition of like having this sense of equality and freedom and embracing other cultures has to be the same as everyone, of course. And that's something that McGee talks about as well, where not everyone is going to have the same fixed idea of what all of these concepts that should be a part of American ideals have to be. So it's more of like this person that is willing to be in this coalition of people in this diverse group of people and this setting the other cultures in this melting pot. So at the end of the day, I think it's just someone who respects the home that they call America, with, of course, being a law-abiding person, and also having to also embrace these other people that also live probably at your doorstep, or who's your neighbor, who is probably completely different than who you are and what you believe in, or a different culture. But at the end of the day, they're still your neighbor, and they're still someone who is part of this brotherhood per se that America is. So I think that's how an American should be defined as. And then I'll pass it on to Mariah.
Yeah, I would like to start the conversation with actually a couple verses from a jazz poem. I did take jazz poetry at Rutgers, and most of the Black poets and blues artists really speak about America and belonging in such a unique way that I think would contribute to this conversation. So, title Let America Be America Again by Langston Hughes. Let America be America again. Let it be the dream it used to be. Let it be the pioneer of the plain, seeking a home where he himself is free. America never was America to me. Let America be the dream the dreamers dreamed. Let it be that great song, Lands of Love, where never kings convene nor tyrants scheme, that any man be crushed by one above. So, being American is also about this realization that the American dream is not really realized for Black Americans, but also for any kind of American that doesn't fit into the mold. I'm sure everyone on this panel has been raised to think about the American dream, stereotypical work hard or work hard enough and you will be successful. And that isn't necessarily true. And I'll also like to point out that defining American identity from the legal perspective may be a starting point, although it's very limiting. However, it's fundamental because legal protections and freedoms form the foundation of American democracy. And as someone who is aspiring to become a lawyer, I believe that the legal definition of the American identity would be appropriate. And I'm not talking about citizenship status here, citizenship status. I'm talking about certain cases, for example, like Loving v. Virginia, which struck down on the miscegenation laws and legalized interracial marriage. And it is really an example of how the law can shape and expand American identity, of being able to love who you want to love, but not also that, but being able to define anyone as American, citizenship status or not. So nonetheless, while legal protections are necessary, and they're not necessarily sufficient to capture the complexity of American identity, I do think it's an important start to consider. And I'd like to pass it to Isela.
Thank you, Mariah. Yeah, so I would say that how I've seen American being defined is through the idea of double consciousness, having to have two distinct identities, one being your background and then the other part being an American, and having to have that kind of switch code with when you're with a particular group of people and then with other groups of people, just having to like constantly switch your mindset to appeal to these group of people, and then being yourself with your own people as well is something that I know touches home when it comes to the immigrant community. Particularly, I would say that you could be at a like fast food restaurant, and the people that are working there are people of color. Maybe someone who's Mexican, for example, and that person barely speaks English, who's undocumented, who's working for maybe below minimum wage, and just works like crazy, right? Like a horse. It just works like a machine, right? And then having to, put up the best face to the boss. Having to like use the best words that you can, make something up because you barely can speak English. And then, still doing whatever is you're being told to do. And then having to work a job where you're not getting paid enough to not get fired because you're under the expense of someone potentially going and deporting you, right? Calling you out. It's that kind of idea that I think about double consciousness, in the sense that you not only that you have to switch codes, but also the fact that you have to be conscious continuously. Like being conscious about your situation and where you stand. You're such an like walking a very tight line. And I don't want to make this like very conceptual. I'm just talking from the fact that this is what people live through on a day-to-day basis. That you're very much in a delicate space at all times, and that you always have to have like your radar on, because who knows, like the next minute you can be deported, the next minute you could be fired because you're not per se doing your job right, or simply because they just want to get rid of you and they need someone else to like continue to exploit. It's so kind of what that I don't want to leave it in the negative. Know that that's what defines an American, but usually that's the case for undocumented people. That you kind of have to put up your best face, or your best effort, your best foot into wherever you're going, because that might be your only chance, right? And moving on from that negative note, I want to make kind of just really define to me what it means to be an American. And I think that just means, again, having all opportunities available to everyone and anyone, right? Having the political representation in Congress, where people like yourself are also making the laws, and not someone who is there for some kind of trying to push their agenda, really seen or heard. And I think it's all about having individual rights, having human rights, first of all. Respecting one another, being compassionate about one another, asking the fellow person next to you, are they okay? I think that's what it means to be an American, to like build each other up, empower each other, so that this country can thrive overall. But I'll leave it at that. I'll pass it on to Mahima.
So I really like the fact that you guys brought up Langston Hughes and W.E.B. Du Bois, and I think someone that goes along that line for me is Frederick Douglass. I know we talked about him when we were discussing What to the Slave is the 4th of July, And I think him as a person is really what I define as an American. I believe above all, he was doing his best for what he could for the country, and he still didn't feel like he belonged. He was tokenized as this black man because he was educated, and so he was supposed to give a speech on the 4th of July, but he was saying that this country doesn't belong to me. You guys don't make me feel like I belong here. But I think everything he embodies and the fact that he perseveres despite everything that was put upon him and black people is very admirable. And I think that's what, as someone who's like very patriotic, I believe that I am very patriotic. I think that that's one of my main priorities, where I think that we should be able to confront the past and what has happened and use that to move forward. And I believe that if anyone that focuses on benefiting this country, like taxpayers, we say a lot of undocumented people, as Isela was saying, like they work very hard. They work like machines, and they're paying so much money in taxes towards this country. Communities, and just all of that is what I define as an American. And now I'll pass. Is everyone okay? Did it freeze?
Oh, when you started cutting out towards the
Yeah.
end.
Oh
Could
no.
you maybe you could repeat what you said? That way.
Yeah, just repeat what you
Okay.
said.
A little bit sorry to make this harder for everyone.
It's okay, we'll just cut this part out.
Okay, so I really like the fact that you guys brought up Langston Hughes and W.E.B. Du Bois, because I also think of Frederick Douglass as like the same category of what I would define as American. So I believe that so we talked about like what's the slave of the 4th of July and how much he gave to his country. Despite not belonging, he still went out of his way to constantly fight, be educated, and fight for the rights of Black people that aren't perceived as American unless it's time to be tokenized. And so in that same light, I believe that anyone that works very hard in this country and tries to give back to this country is who an American is. So I categorize myself as patriotic because I do love this country, but I know that there is a lot that has to be changed, a lot that has to improve. And I believe that anyone that's working here to improve this country, to make change, to make our society better, should be defined as American. I don't think a simple border that was placed by people is what defines us. So for this lifestyle, this American dream, and a lot of their money goes towards taxpayers, or like they're taken out of it goes to benefit like the U.S. citizen, right? So they're working to benefit everyone around them, and I don't think that they should be taken out of that conversation. I think they're also an epitome of what it means to be an American, what it means to try to help everyone around you and build up your society and your country. And I'll pass it on to you, Ryan.
Thanks. So ever since I heard it in 7th grade history class, a quote that has always stood or resonated with me is, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." So for me, being an American is one that recognizes and learns about our painful past and seeks to do something about it, whether regardless of citizenship, race, ethnicity, gender. I feel like all of us should be considered as Americans, as we all carry this vision to empower this country and make this country better than the way we left it. I feel like mainstream media and all these systems seek to make us feel like we don't belong or make us feel like whatever, that we're not worthy of being an American. But I feel like it's back to embracing one's culture and that we are all fabrics of the American landscape, and that is something to be celebrated.
Thank you, Ryan. I did want to kind of have an input going off of what Mahima was saying, that I think that it is important to also, I guess, be patriotic within being American as well. And I think there's a very fine line between being patriotic. And I think a good example of that would be the insurrection that occurred in January, just a couple of years back, where these people were gathered together at Capitol Hill and thought they were above Congress and above all our House of Representatives and also the senators, and tried to overtake this election that was occurring democratically and that was occurring properly as it should be in the procedural that occurs within elections. And I believe that, of course, it obviously is important to be able to stand by our country. And I think it's important to be able to imagine the other aspects that I was talking about earlier about America, and like how, of course, there's so many flaws that it has, just like with every country, there's so many flaws that there are. And I think the true definition of being patriotic is having to be able to embrace the good, the bad, and the ugly within America, and pushing forward for a better country for everyone of all races, of all creeds, all religions, all identities. So if no one else is want to interject or anything, I think that is the end for our segment of What is an American, and we'll be going on to our next segment in the next recording.